Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It is pre-match build-up show with Liverpool finally back in action after yet another 10-day break and finally back as well in Champions League action as we take on Bayern Munich at Anfield on Tuesday night in the Champions League round of 16 in what is essentially a bit of a free hit for Liverpool, I think it's fair to say, because obviously the league is such a huge priority this season, and you've had some pundits putting forward this ridiculous idea that we shouldn't even bother with the Champions League and we should not try and get ourselves knocked out, but not really care about it and put all of our resources into the league. But the fact of the matter is, at this early stage, it's not like we're going to be playing week in, week out over and over again. It's not like Champions League round of 16 ties are going to push our squad beyond its own limits. So I don't think by any means we should be looking at this game and thinking we can't actually pool all of our resources into it and give it our best go. But on the other hand, if it doesn't go well, if we get knocked out, it's against Bayern Munich. They're a solid team. They are still a European giant, regardless of what's been going on there this season under Niko Kovac. And also, there's no shame, like I said, there's no shame in being knocked out. And of course, the league is still the priority. If we go out, we've still got plenty to fight for between now and the end of the season. So it's an incredibly exciting game and one where the pressure is essentially off. And in a season where we've had to deal with endless pressure, in a season where pretty much every single game, every single weekend has been do or die. It's been a cup final. It's been, if this goes wrong, then Man City are going to be breathing down our necks, or they're going to leapfrog us, or everyone's going to be talking about how Liverpool have bottled it. It's nice to just go into a game, regardless of how big and difficult it's going to be, and say, let's just have some fun. Let's just enjoy ourselves. And of course, with it coming after that break as well, it's a fantastic chance to make a bit of a statement and build up some momentum ahead of the game against Manchester United. I'm kind of glad it's not the league game coming first, because we saw what happened against Leicester, where we had that really long break. The players went away on their holidays to Dubai and everything, and they didn't look like they were quite in the groove of things. I think because of the occasion, the fact that the crowd will be jeering the players up and getting them excited, and will throw them into this tie with all the momentum in the world behind them. We don't have to worry about them looking a bit sluggish like they did against Leicester. But also, I'm just glad the Man United game is at first, because I'd worry then that we wouldn't quite be ready for the occasion. However, because it's a European night at Anfield, I don't think the players will need any more encouragement to get themselves up for this game. So team news going into the game. As we all know, Liverpool have got a little bit of a problem. Despite all the excitement that I've just been building into you over the last couple of minutes at the start of this video, things aren't going too great in terms of the defensive department when it comes to injuries and player ineligibility through suspensions. As we all know, Virgil van Dijk is not going to be available for this game after picking up a yellow card in the game against Napoli. Joe Gomez is still a long-term absentee. He is unfortunately far from being fit, which is not what we were expecting when we first got the news of the Van Dijk suspension. I think we all thought Gomez was going to be back by now. As it stands, it's still probably going to be at least a month until we can even think about him coming back into training, let alone playing for the first team. So Van Dijk and Gomez are both unavailable. Dejan Lovren is also being considered unlikely to recover in time for this game. Now, Liverpool are doing everything they possibly can to get him ready. They've left him at home when we went to Marbella on Merseyside to just try and help him continue his recovery there. He's now also been sent to a strength and conditioning coach in Croatia. I think part of that is also a long-term consideration, not just thinking about trying to get him ready for this game, because he has had so many injuries in his time at Liverpool and they do seem to recur. He rarely goes through a run of games where he can play like 7 games in a row and not pick up some sort of injury on the way. So I think the strength and conditioning coach is as much about getting him back and potentially fit for this game as it is about getting him fit for the title running and keeping him fit for the title running as well. And Jurgen Klopp has not completely ruled him out. He said that, there's a possibility he might play. But one thing Jurgen Klopp did say is that he is planning without him. And I think a lot of work will have gone in on that training pitch in Marbella, on that 4-day camp, to try and work out what our best possible solution to this centre-back crisis. And yeah, let's be honest, it is a bit of a crisis. It's just for this game, of course, because Van Dijk will be available for the games against Man United and, of course, the second leg at the Allianz Arena in the Champions League as well. But for this one game, we are in a little bit of a pickle. In terms of other injury news, Trent Alexander-Arnold is also, there's been a few reports about how he's not quite fully fit yet and how it's going to take a few weeks for him to actually build up to the kind of fitness that we saw from him last season and at early stages of this season as well. However, I think because he played against Bournemouth, he's been to the training camp and everything, it's likely that he will still be fit enough to play at least some some role in this game. So, as for how I think the team are actually going to line up, in goal, obviously, Alisson Becker, the man who is the reason why we're here in the first place. Let's not forget, it was his phenomenal save against Napoli in stoppage time that stopped us from plummeting into the Europa League, and we owe him an absolutely huge debt for that. So, of course, he's going to start in this game. The centre-back pairing, I think, of course, Joel Matip has to play. He's the only centre-back who's actually definitely going to be fit for this game. Fingers crossed nothing goes wrong in training there. It would be just our luck if Joel Matip pulls up with something in the warm-up or something ridiculous like that. And then I think partnering him is probably going to be Fabinho. Now, the thing that's kind of been mentioned in a lot of news outlets is that Jurgen Klopp is currently experimenting with both Fabinho and Henderson in that role. I think it was interesting that apparently Henderson was slated to play centre-back alongside Fabinho in the game against Wolves in the FA Cup, and it was only an injury the day before the game that actually meant that Dejan Lovren played, and of course, as we all know, that's when he picked up the injury that's led to him not being available for this game. Funny how things work out. But both of those, Henderson and Fabinho, have been training to potentially play centre-back in this game. I think if we only have to play one, you'd probably go with Fabinho simply because he's a bit more tried and tested there. I don't think we've ever actually played Jordan Henderson as a centre-back, certainly not in the start of games, maybe as like an emergency centre-back in a back three or something like that, but never ever starting in a pairing, whereas Fabinho, we've seen him do it for a couple of games, and yeah, obviously this is so much more of a test than anything he's done in the past. This is not Wolves we're playing, this isn't Brighton we're playing, this is Bayern Munich, and he's going to be up against one of the best centre-forwards in the world in Lewandowski, but the fact that he's tried and tested, the fact he can play in positions like right back as well, for me means that I think he will probably end up playing alongside Joel Matip in the centre-back pairing. Then the left back has to be Andrew Robertson. The right back has to be Trent. I think, you know, Milner, I love him, but Trent is still the better right back by far, and I think if he's anywhere near full fitness, obviously not if he looks like 70%, but the suggestions seem to be, and the assumption you'd make based on how he performed against Bournemouth, he looked pretty sharp in that game. I'd say he must be at least 90%, and I think that's probably good enough at least to play in this game over someone like James Milner, who would of course be out of position. The midfield then, I think we go with the three. I think we have to go with that simply because it's Champions League, and we played the 4-3-3 against Bournemouth and it worked fine. Played it against West Ham, it didn't really go well. We've used it in Champions League games as well. I think against PSG, it looked really, really good, and I think that's the kind of template that we want to follow. So I think we definitely go with the three-man midfield, just because obviously it gives us that extra body. We don't really need someone extra in attack because I think we're going to be looking to score a lot of goals on the counter-attack and stuff like that in this game. So I think you go with Henderson at the base. That's another one of the reasons that I didn't really want Fabinho in the mid. I didn't really want Henderson in the centre-back pairing because I think we could really do with him in the midfield for this game. I think he was great against Napoli. I think, what's the other game I'm trying to think of? I think it was Crystal Palace where he was really, really solid. And I think if we get that kind of performance out of Jordan Henderson, it'll be fantastic to have him in as the number 6. And then either side of him, I think you have to go with Gini Wijnaldum. You know, he's one of the first names on the team sheet. He is a fantastic midfielder who put in a phenomenal performance in that slightly more advanced role against Bournemouth. So I'd like to see him there because I was kind of torn. I was wondering whether to put Milner in this midfield, but that would have meant that I would have had to, as you'll find out when I pick the final player, that I would have had to have either choose between Hendo or Gini in midfield as the number 6. And I think both of them deserve to play in this game. And like I said, Wijnaldum was great in that more advanced role against Bournemouth. So I think you put Henderson in the 6, you play Wijnaldum a bit further forward. And then just a little bit ahead of them, but still occupying a role in the 3, I think is going to be Naby Keita. I felt harsh leaving Milner out because he's great for these kind of Champions League games. You know, his energy, his ability to drive the ball forward as well. You know, he's the assist king of the Champions League as well, as we all know. And also that kind of tough tackling mentality, his ability to just fly in and win the ball and set off counter-attacks doing that was so, so important last season. And I'd love to have it, but Naby Keita was really, really good against Bournemouth. He seems to be thriving in that most advanced role of the midfield 3. And obviously, he knows Bayern. He's played against them before. He's got sent off against them before as well. So, you know, it wouldn't surprise me much if he did get a red card in this game. But it also wouldn't surprise me if he got a goal or an assist or something like that. Because that is, you know, the kind of thing that he has always done against Bayern. It seems to be a team that he thrives playing against in his Leipzig days, and I think he would be an absolutely fantastic player to have in our midfield three. And of course, we haven't really seen Keita in a Champions League game in that kind of role for us so far. So I just want to see how that kind of situation would pan out. So that is how I think the midfield's going to line up. Then these front three, I think, of course, it has to be Salah back into his old role on the right wing, Mane on the left, and Firmino as the false nine. So taking a look at Bayern Munich then, obviously, as we all know, not been a great season for them so far. You know, if there was any year you'd want to draw Bayern Munich, and any stage in the competition as well, I think, then this would be the one. You know, if it was in the group stage, I feel like the pressure would be off of them a little bit and they'd therefore play with a bit more freedom. If it was in the semi-finals or the quarter-finals, I think their experience would start to show. They'd sort of become the European giant that we know they all are. But the round of 16 is kind of this weird situation where they aren't expected to go out. Bayern Munich are not a team that should be getting knocked out in the Champions League round of 16, and yet suddenly it's a genuine possibility, and with the possibility that they might not win the Bundesliga this season as well. You know, they are only 2 points behind Dortmund, but Dortmund have got that game in hand on Monday night, so they are not in the best position. If they go out of the Champions League as well, then serious questions are going to start to be asked about Niko Kovac, and I am interested to see how that affects them, whether that makes them play really well, whether because this is a do or die, he comes up with some mad plan that we don't expect and it works incredibly well. It's the kind of thing that young managers are known for doing, you know, kind of just throwing caution to the wind. Pep Guardiola did it against us in the Champions League last season as well, where he put out that kind of 3-3-1-3 formation or whatever the hell it was. It didn't work. But there were times in the game where it really did, where we were absolutely being overrun and we were almost getting slaughtered by the sheer amount of attacking players City had on the pitch. And I wonder whether Niko Kovac might be inclined to do a similar thing and just say, you know what, I'm going to do something crazy and just see if it pays off. But so far this season, they haven't really been that good at all. I think one of the key problems they've had, which was pinpointed, I think it was an article in the Liverpool Echo, was that Kovac is not used to defending counter-attacks. When he was at, I think it was Eintracht Frankfurt last season, they were mostly a defensive team, so he was used to having plenty of players back. And with Bayern having to be the more aggressive side, the ones who have to dominate the ball, he's not really worked out how to get around the space that leaves in behind, especially with the fact that they've got Kimmich, a natural midfielder, bombing on from right back. You've got Alaba, who loves to get forward and join the attack, bombing on from left back as well. Now, obviously, as we know, Liverpool's main danger often comes from the wings, especially in these kind of games when you've got Salah getting down the wing and cutting inside, Mane going down the other side as well, and of course Robbo and Trent bombing on and joining attacks at times as well. That's one of Liverpool's main weapons in these type of games, and it is Bayern's main weakness as well. And their main weakness this season has been counter-attacks, has been those two centre-back pairing, which they still haven't worked out as well. You know, they haven't worked out who out of Saul, Hummels and Boateng to actually play. Obviously, Hummels and Boateng excuse me, are both getting a little bit old now and their form hasn't been great this season, which means that Saul has actually ended up being their best centre-back, and it's kind of rotated between Hummels and Boateng. I think it was Hummels who played in the game against Augsburg on Friday night, and they did look incredibly fragile, especially on the counter-attack in that game. So plenty of problems at Bayern Munich when it comes to player availability. Thomas Müller is not going to be available through suspension for either of these legs after that mad kung fu kick he did in the last game of the group stage against Ajax. If you ask me, that's a good thing. Some people don't rate Müller. They think he's a bit useless. But I think this is the kind of game where he's just got that something about him. You know, he is a goal scorer at the end of the day. He's a predator. He seems to like big games in the Champions League as well. So I would have been worried about Müller playing any role. So I think that suspension is a good thing for us. Apart from that, in terms of player availability, Arjen Robben is not going to be available. He's had an injury that's been keeping him out for quite a lot of the season so far. They did have another injury scare as well on Friday night where Kingsley Coman went off late on in the game and he actually scored 2 goals and was probably Bayern's best player in that match as well. So that was a huge scare for them. But at the moment, it's looking, according to the scans, he hasn't suffered any ligament damage to his ankle. So he should be fine for this game. Whether or not he'll be 100%, whether or not Bayern will be willing to risk starting him and potentially aggravating the injury remains to be seen. They have, of course, got Ribery on the bench who, you know, isn't really ideal for them because like Robben, he's getting pretty old now and has lost that kind of spark. I think certainly I'd rather play up against Ribery than I would against Kingsley Coman at the moment, especially with the issues we've got in defence at the moment. But It'll be interesting to see whether or not he plays and, you know, whether or not he does any good in the game, given the fact that he will have had an injury and probably won't have trained much in the build-up to the game. So Bayern have got some injury problems of their own as well. I think what it's really going to come down to for them is whether experience or age shows, because they have obviously got a lot of experienced heads in Europe. These guys have been to semi-finals, they've been to finals, they've won it before as well. They know how this is done. However, they're getting on a little bit as well, and it's whether the experience allows them to manage the game and be careful, or whether age gets the better of them and they just can't cope with the sheer speed of some of Liverpool's players. So I think it's going to be a great game, in all honesty. I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic. You know, it's always great when the eyes of Europe are on Liverpool. I absolutely love that idea that we are the standout tie, that everyone is fascinated by this game. It's great as well that we were the team that absolutely no one wanted in the draw. That's always a bit of a confidence boost as well, and a psychological boost. You know, Bayern will have been kicking themselves when they saw Liverpool come out of the pot, so that's obviously fantastic as well. But, you know, I think it's going to be a great game. I don't think we're going to keep a clean sheet, simply because of the issues at centre-back, the fact that it's probably going to be Matip and Fabinho, or Matip and Henderson, or God forbid, Henderson and Fabinho, and the fact they have got an elite finisher in Robert Lewandowski and an absolute pest on the wing in Kingsley Coman. But on the flip side, I do think our attack on the counter is going to be far too much for their defence to deal with. So I think, score prediction, I'm going to go with 3-1 to Liverpool. You know, the tie will probably not be over by any means, but I think we'll have a pretty solid advantage to take back to the Allianz Arena in a month's time. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very, very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, as always, hit the like button down there, hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days as well. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back on Tuesday night after we have hopefully beaten Bayern Munich in the Champions League. Until then, bye for now.